Welcome, one and all, to the Draft Savages NFL Draft Podcast, part of the Football Savages Network. I'm your host, Seth Cox. With me tonight, my co-host, Justis Mosqueda. Justis, how are you?
Can't complain. Can't complain.
And our guest tonight, talking Carolina Panthers and New Orleans Saints, focusing in on teams finally. Matt Harmon. Matt, how are you?
I'm good, guys. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm pretty beat. No line there. Got a lot going on right now, but I'm excited to talk NFC South with you guys.
Yeah, and this is kind of the start. We were debating on how to hit the draft season, if you would, and we landed on divisions, and so we're gonna have Matt on to talk the Panthers and the Saints. Luke Easterling will join us. Maybe sometime later this week to talk the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and Scott Karasik and of course the ever wonderful Andrew Parsons will join us to talk the Falcons and the mess that is the Falcons down in Atlanta. So
They're
that
picking
should
Ray.
be
Do we even have to have a hangout? Like they're just gonna pick Ray.
yeah. We'll probably we're already explicit on iTunes, so I'm just assuming we'll be banned with Parsons. Atlanta Falcons only draft takes, but it's worth it. So, and so we'll get started tonight. And tonight's, like I said, is going to be about the Panthers first. Matt, you're a Panthers fan, I guess, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it. But fortunately, they play in the NFC South, so they won the division. They beat the Cardinals, maybe quarterbacked by the worst playoff quarterback in the history of the NFL in a playoff game, and so my question to start off tonight is, did that 2014 playoff berth, was that more harmful than it was helpful in terms of the building of the Panthers going forward?
I have such a complicated relationship with the Panthers that it's hard to really talk about them in a normalized sense, but I'm going to try to do that. And honestly, I think that it was more good than I thought it originally. I thought originally it would be harmful and that they would kind of see themselves as a better team than they are. But the way they've gone out and just kind of stuck with the plan that they have the last 3 off seasons of not going crazy in free agency and just kind of focusing on retaining their own players, I think that they have been able to keep a level-headed approach about what they are, and that they're not all of a sudden like an NFC powerhouse. But I think that they understand that they have a pretty good opportunity to kind of take control of the division, even though their record wasn't that great last year. When I look across at all 4 teams, I feel like they clearly have the best core and are just the most stable team right now. So overall, I think that they're kind of they're realistic about where they are, but also optimistic in that they understand that they're really kind of the one team that I think could take a leap in the division.
Justice, when you look at this Panthers team from an outside perspective, they've obviously got the franchise quarterback in place. It's been about identifying talent and finding help for Cam Newton for the last couple of years. They obviously built ass backwards and signing every running back and paying running backs, and now it looks like they're finally cleaning that up a little bit. What's the first order of business from an outside perspective that the Panthers need to go into in this draft?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's really just where the talent lands. I mean, if one of these receivers somehow falls, I could see them coming swooping them up. I mean, they have Kelvin Benjamin, but I mean that doesn't address all the skill player issues the Panthers have had when they brought in Cam Newton. Also, their best tackle is probably Michael Orr, right? So that's an issue. That defense kind of regressed a little bit, but the way they scheme it, I mean, you can kind of like plug and play outside of maybe if like an Alvin Dupree like type edge rusher for some reason still on the board, because Alvin Dupree's a guy that I have no idea where to pin him down. Like on paper, he should be a top 10 pick, but I mean we have guys like Bob McGinn who writes for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, who I believe is one that I'm forgetting the name of it, but that like composite draft board thing that everyone does every year. And McGinn scores in the top 5 like every single season it's existed, and he has like more number ones than anyone else put together. So like McGinn's very good at predicting like how the like physical draft is going to like drop down, and he had Dupree like the 40-something guy. I remember Seth and
Wow.
Justin and I were talking about this. So I was like, I mean, there are guys like Lake and Tomlinson ranked ahead of him, and this was from talks from scouts and things like that. So I mean, if a guy like Dupree is on the board, I mean, totally go swing that. I mean, they obviously needed some help once Hardy wasn't playing. They kind of missed that spot, and that's really what they needed on that defense. So I could see, receiver, tackle, and if an edge rusher for some reason should drop, really, if there's any value at any of those three spots, I could totally see him taking a swing.
Matt, for you, when you look at this team, he kind of hit it with the offensive line troubles, especially at the tackle position. Is this a draft where you could see them reaching, or is this a draft where Gettleman sits on his board and takes another maybe defensive player, or maybe even like a running back at that position?
See, I really hope that, and I actually have pretty strong faith that he would stick to the board and not reach for an offensive tackle. I mean, he didn't do it last year when I thought Morgan Moses was the best player that they could have taken at that spot, and then they went ahead and took Benjamin. I feel like that situation will probably play itself out again. Like, I could see if Andrews Pete was there, which he's not going to be because the NFL is going to like him a lot, and I could see if he was there that that would be an okay pick. But I've been watching guys like Flowers and Humphreys, and I just don't see any reason why they should try to force a tackle there when this is already a weaker draft class when you start. Like, there's not going to be a bunch of first-round grade players at that spot, so why would you reach even further? I guess is the way I look at it. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting receivers there. And like Justis mentioned, Benjamin's a really good player. He's better than I and a lot of other people thought he would be coming out of college. But I still think that they could take a shot at a guy who maybe offers more speed or a more all-around skill set in general. So, and like you said, defensive side of the ball and running back are totally in play there too. Gettleman's kind of hard to predict because he really is that best player available or best graded need available sort of guy, and I think that we're going to see that play itself out again, and I definitely do not think that they will take a tackle in the first round unless a guy slips.
When you look at that board, I think you guys are picking 25th ish.
Yeah,
I forgot already.
Yeah, I think it's 25th.
Yeah, that's how ready we are already. But when you look at the board and like you said, Andres Pete, what about like a TJ Clemmings? If he's there, is he a guy that could be the pick, or is that raw technique type thing probably not what they need at this point?
See, I really don't think that that's what they need at this point, and I like Clemmings as a guy who could develop into something, but I would really, if they're going to take a tackle, you'd kind of be hoping that he could play left tackle from day one, and I don't see any of these guys being close to able to do that. They have Michael Orr, who's obviously pretty terrible. He's pretty much just the same player that Byron Bell is. I know Panthers fans on Twitter kind of want to talk themselves into that they got a slight upgrade there, but you really didn't. I promise you. The other guy that they had starting on the right side last year, late in the year, was Mike Remmers, who they just kind of picked up off waivers, and he really played very well when he got in the game. And he's a guy I think that they can go into training camp feeling that he can hold down that right tackle spot, and then they just kind of kick around with Orr at left tackle. So I don't really see the point in taking a guy like Clemmings who's going to need time to develop and may never turn into that left tackle anyways.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the play the draft thing, and it's just like the composite stock board type thing.
Yeah.
And the top guys that they have at receiver, edge, and tackle are Clemmings. Like you said, I mean, I think his upside is at a right tackle, and I think Orr's fine sticking out there right now. I think, like you said, they need a left tackle. Then Dorial Green Beckham, I don't think that can happen after what happened with Hardy, right? Like that has to just be crossed off.
No.
But then the next three are kind of interesting. They have Humphreys, who does have the upside to play left tackle, even though he played at University of Florida at only 280 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Owa, who's a very good power rusher, but his hips medically are going to be a concern. And then Devin Smith, who's kind of like the opposite of Kelvin Benjamin, right? Like he's just kind of like speed flying down the sideline. That might be an interesting match. I mean, those are really the three that I could see that are like, oh, these might be the picks.
I would really dig Smith at that spot. You guys know I do reception perception for a few college prospects, and Devin Smith was one of the guys that I did. And I chart success rate versus coverage on each route, and on his vertical routes, 9 routes, he posted a 90.5% success rate versus coverage, which is, if you don't pay attention to it, reception perception, that's like really stupid. I mean, that's like crazy. And so that's how good he is as a vertical threat, and I think that he shows a lot of like nuances as a route runner that lead you to think that he could become even more than that. So I think he would have value like day one, as soon as he walks into Carolina, because they don't have anybody like that. They haven't had anybody like that for years, pretty much since Cam Newton's been there, other than Ted Ginn, who they re-signed. But I mean, come on, like I think, yeah. So
you're welcome.
Yeah, we let him go to Cardinals, and he comes right back, and I don't know. So yeah, no, I think that Smith would, out of all those options, I think Smith would be the best, but I could totally see Owa going there as well.
Have we come up as the draft community with the name for Owa, so nobody has to actually pronounce his name? Is it Owa, or are we going with Diggy, or like what's the name?
There's Owa, Diggy, Scrabble, Alphabet. Yeah.
Alphabet. I like Alphabet.
Those seem to be the names.
You guys there's so many hot takes that like you guys just hit on that you have no idea about that are like in my mentions that it make me laugh. So the Dorial Beckham Green, I'll just hit on one real quick. The Dorial Beckham Green one. I don't know if you saw our guy Dane Brugler talk about that the other day. Where'd it go? I forget who he was talking to, but he was talking to a guy and basically said, here it is. Could Miami take Brugler? And somebody said, with all their issues, can they take somebody with a domestic violence background? And he was like, his issues are more marijuana related, not domestic violence. And I was like, whoa, that's I don't think a lot of people actually care about the weed stuff. I mean, I could be wrong, but I thought I was more about the whole pushing the girl down the stairs type thing that people got like rightfully so up in arms about. So I thought that was an interesting conversation I saw. But when you look at 25, I mean, it's right next to the Cardinals, so I can talk about it from my point of view as well. The way this draft is set up, if you could trade back theoretically and pick up like another 2 and a 3 or something like that, I don't know what the trade value is going to be, but if you trade back into the second round and pick up that additional second and maybe a third or a fourth, isn't the value in this draft going to be more quantity than maybe quality outside of the top 15, Matt?
Yeah, I would totally dig that because I think that you're right. It is where the value is going to lie. Having multiple shots in that kind of range of where, you know, it falls off of, like, there's not a lot of first-round players in that late first-round range, but there's going to be a bunch of second-round guys and then stretching into the second, maybe third round. So I think if you take multiple shots in that area, that would be better. And like, I haven't talked about running backs yet, but I think Carolina definitely needs to take one. And, like, if they took, like, an Ajayi or an Abdullah, that would be kind of like a dream scenario for me. If they were able to snag, like, trade backs, snag one of those running backs, and then a wide receiver like Smith or Aguilar or something, I think that they could come away from that second round feeling really, really good. So I would love that.
Justis, for you, when you look at the Panthers, maybe one of their weakest spots last year was in the defensive secondary. We had Ian Wharton on, sound issues and all last week, and we had talked about the cornerback class and the lack of talent at the safety class. If a guy like Kevin Johnson, who should be there at 25, or maybe even a Marcus Peters for some odd reason falls down to 25, is he a guy, or, you know, if Peters falls, does Carolina have to run to the podium at that point with their issues at the corner position?
I mean, I would ride with that, but I like Peters a lot, and Peters is probably a top 10 guy to me. So I might not be the best guy to ask. But as far as Kevin Johnson and stuff, I mean, I get a lot of those questions now as a Green Bay fan and a guy who covered Green Bay for Bleacher Report, because, you know, Tramon Williams just signed for $7 million a year in New Orleans, or in Cleveland. and Devon House got like 6.5 in Jacksonville, and like Packer fans cannot fathom that these cornerbacks are gone for that much money. And we knew it was going to be a bad corner class in free agency, and it's not a great corner class in the draft. So, I mean, I guess that inflated the market. But, I mean, these numbers are just kind of insane. If Kevin Johnson is there, I wouldn't hate it that late. P.J. Williams is probably the other dude that I would consider. Jalen Collins is going to be there, and he's a bit of a project. I'd draft Kevin Johnson and P.J. Williams pretty consistently over him. He's probably in that next tier with Ronald Darby. But if Peters is there, I mean, you'd have to hold me back because I'm running.
You hit on a name that Matt Miller, a friend of the show, has talked about quite a bit. Ronald Darby, getting some pub. What are your thoughts on him, Matt? And is that position just too rich for your blood there?
Yeah, Darby's the one he ran a pretty good time at the combine, right? Yeah, he's a guy he was pretty impressive when I went back and actually compared the two Florida State corners. I kind of like Darby just a little bit better than I did Williams, and I guess the athletic numbers kind of bore that out. But honestly, I know that if Peter slipped, that would be one thing to consider. But I do think that position is too rich for my blood in the first round. Because honestly, I mean, we've kind of seen the same story play out 2 years in a row with Carolina's secondary. Like, it comes in being a hole that they've kind of patched with some of these, has-been guys or never wers, honestly. But last year they got really good play out of Josh Norman. I mean, when they finally just let Norman kind of read and like just react as opposed to like do a lot of thinking at the outside boundary spot, he was really, really good. I mean, he shut down Julio Jones pretty well. I used to write for Black and Blue Review, which is like a Panthers site, and I posted a piece on him, and he did a great job against Julio Jones and several other top competition guys. So I think you can kind of count on him as a starter. And Bené Benwickery, who they took in the 5th round last year, or 5th or 4th round, he turned into a really good player too. So I don't think the corner's that big of a need. Maybe safety, but they also got good play out of Trey Boston, and just the way they scheme things up, the way McDermott does it, and how good in coverage Davis and Kuechly are at linebacker. It's really not that big of a deal, and I don't really see it being a spot where they're really gonna attack that in the first 2 rounds. So I don't know. Maybe like I like Eric Rowe a lot. Like if he's there, maybe their 2nd pick or something like that. I think that he could play a really good role as like a safety corner, a slot corner hybrid. That would be interesting. But other than that, I just don't really see the point because they get pretty good play out of these guys who aren't functional anywhere else.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the Panthers is their linebackers, like Kuechly and Thomas Davis, because they're able to cover so much ground, they make the zones for the defensive backs so much smaller. Mm-hmm. And even with Hardy gone, I mean, they were getting production from guys like Mario Addison as far as like pressure is concerned. Really, because of how good that front is, it helps that back end a lot. That's why I think adding like a premier edge guy would have a lot more impact in the pass game than adding a premier corner or safety.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
When you look at day 3 of the draft, you've already hit on it. The Panthers do a good job of finding guys that fit what they need and can play a role early. Who are some guys you personally are looking at that kind of fit into those roles?
Well, I talked about them taking a receiver up top, and I really would like them to double dip this year. So maybe taking another receiver in day 3. I always want them to double dip a receiver, and I'm a receiver guy, so that probably is a little bit of that coming out. But Justice is wearing the UNLV hat tonight, and actually, if they were able to take a guy who I've scouted all year for Optimum Scouting, if they were able to take Devontae Davis in the 3rd day, I would love that because he's another guy kind of like Kelvin Benjamin who has that. He's not a really quick twitch athlete. He's not like a consistent route runner. He has some drops. He's not great after the catch, but like he has that just undeniable trump card of just being able to go up and get the ball at its highest point. And I think those two would really fit in well across from each other, kind of like a light version, like a super light version. I'm not going to go crazy of like when Chicago had Marshall and Jeffrey together. I think that would be an interesting pick for them. And in general, just if they don't take a running back like a Ajayi in the 2nd round, I think that if you come back and get a Mike Davis in like the 4th round or David Cobb in that range, I think that they have to add some good young blood talent at both of these positions that are really deep. So maybe a guy like Davis or one of these other late round receivers would be a nice, interesting target. And same with the running backs, because like we've been saying all draft season, these are two really deep groups. I think that they need to focus more on surrounding Cam Newton with some interesting and athletic talents at the skill positions, and I think that they can do that late in this draft.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot. Dream scenario type thing, but realistic dream scenario. Top 3 picks for you.
Oh wow. Okay, this is realistic, and I think this could legitimately happen. If they went Devin Smith in the first round, Jay Ajayi in the second round, and then Duron Smith, safety from Fresno State, if they took him the third round, I think he'd be a really good fit in that defense. I think that's pretty realistic. Although that's not going to happen because it's what I want. So
you're going to end up with T.J. Clemmings and.
Oh yeah, it's going to be like Clemmings and some trash corner in the second. That's that's the way it goes.
All right. Anything else on the Panthers tonight, Justis?
I think we're covered. Free Cam Newton, still free Cam.
Yeah.
Going 3 years strong. Free Cam.
I'll tell you what. I know you told me to come up with a hot take. Honestly, I think that if Gurley's there in the first round for them, I think that ends up being their pick. I've really been feeling on that lately. That if he slips that far, I think that Gettleman will look at kind of that best player available strategy, and he'll kind of identify that they're fine with leasing D'Angelo Williams. And I know they got great play out of Jonathan Stewart last year, and I love him as much as anybody as a player, but I mean, you can't count on the guy. I think that they'll kind of see that as finally pushing out that era of running back and ushering in a new one. So I think that they'll bypass all those other needs, and they'll take Gurley if he's there at the end of the first round.
Is he going to get past the Cardinals? I don't know. Everybody thinks the Cardinals are taking every running back at this point. So, New Orleans Saints. First off, let's start with Justis. What the hell's going on in New Orleans? Like, is this a rebuild or a retool, or is this just like a farewell tour for Drew Brees? Like, what the hell's going on?
I wouldn't have necessarily said it was a rebuild until that Kenny Stills move. And then that Kenny Stills move, when you're shipping out young, good talent for draft picks, that screams out rebuild. And we also heard that they were looking at trading Cameron Jordan. Cameron Jordan. I always get the names mixed up, man. Cameron Jordan. Every single time I'm like, oh no, I just said the wrong one. That like he was rumored to been in talks with like the Giants, and then I believe it was Jason Broadus who brought up. So someone was like, is it gonna have to be like the first? Is it gonna have to be number 9? And he was like, it was like a 3rd round pick that they were being talked about to trade, to trade him. And I'm just like, that is like good young talent that you have on your team. And it's not like they really have contracts coming up, because they still that year that's coming up and is like present is like the Hakeem Nicks or the Hakeem Hicks season where he was their first selection by them in the 3rd round, because they traded a pick and then they had the Bounty Gate pick taken away. So it's not like they even have like big money to pay. So I have no idea. I mean, why would you try to rebuild when you still have Drew Brees? And I know he's declining, but you can't move past that contract for like the next 2 seasons. And all you're gonna do is like you're gonna be hovering around like 8-8, at worst probably. So that I'm just very confused by everything that's going on there.
Yeah, it's really weird.
And I was gonna say, Matt, from a perspective of a guy that's a fan of a team in the division, it's probably kind of nice to not have to worry about Drew Brees and the Saints anymore, because all of a sudden management's kind of just messing the whole thing up.
Yeah, I guess if I had like any emotional reaction to football, I would think that was pretty sweet. But I'm a little bit hollow. But anyways, yeah, to play the role, yeah, totally. No, I think that it's a weird time, like Justis said, and I don't really know. I don't really know what they're doing either. Like whether it's because it kind of feels like a retool in a way that I think they're kind of restructuring to like, be a better running team. Like they re-sign Mark Ingram. They bring in C.J. Spiller, who's obviously kind of more of like a satellite player, but at the same time, like they trade away one of their offensive linemen who was overpaid, and they bring in another. So it's like I don't really know what they're doing on offense. Like if you look at their skill, other than those two running backs, like their passing game weapons are pretty terrible. I mean, they trade away Jimmy Graham, they trade away Kenny Stills, they have Marcus Colston, who probably would have got cut if he didn't take a big pay cut. And then they have Brandon Cooks, who's coming off an injury, and other than that, like they don't have anything on the roster to throw to.
Yeah, they got like Nick Toon and like Syntavius Jones.
I like Nick Toon.
Benjamin Watson starting.
Did Brandon Coleman make it through training camp with them? Or I remember he was on their roster for
a
minute.
I think he got re-signed on the roster. Yeah, that was one where we were like, I gotta delete the tweets. I have tweets that are like, how is Brandon Coleman still on the board and Kelvin was drafted in the first round?
Hey, you know what? Twitter told me that Kelvin Benjamin was trash this year, and everything he did was only in garbage time, so it doesn't count towards stats. That's what Twitter told me.
The Kelvin Coaster, baby, that's me.
Kelvin Coaster.
There's a one good thing I'm going to leave in this world.
I don't see. Oh no, Coleman is on the roster per Ourlads. Shouts to Dan Shanka and Ourlads.com. Yeah, Coleman is on the roster for the Saints. So, yeah, that's yeah. I've never heard of some of these players either. So there's that too.
It's pretty disgusting.
Yeah, you look at it, and so they're sitting at. Now I have to go back and look at where they're picking because I don't remember.
Their first pick is 13.
Is it 13? Okay, yeah. So they're 13 and 31? Yeah, 31. So at 13, they should be in play for a wide receiver, right? Or can they draft another wide receiver in the first round, Justis?
Well, this is the thing, right? So I'm looking down to play the draft, and I started looking at like the players that should come off the board around it. And it's, tackles, which I don't think they're going to go after. Then there's like defensive linemen, and I could totally see that. I could totally see like a Malcolm Brown or Eddie Goldman. And then the next guy down is Jalen Strong. And I don't necessarily love Jalen Strong in the draft, but if we're talking about Colston kind of declining and you like kind of replacing that jumbo slot role, especially with Jimmy Graham, being out too, I think Jalen Strong could probably play that. And that's probably not like the best value pick. But if they just want to like retool that system, you know what I mean, where they just plug and play a guy that they know can play in that type of role, I could totally see that being one of the selections.
The other interesting thing, and it'll be interesting to see how far, if this even is possible, but they traded Graham, as you said. Their tight ends are now kind of trashed on the roster. And is Max Williams in play at 13 because they can't take a chance of him not getting to 31, or is that just like way too rich there?
I think that would be pretty rich to trade away like the second best tight end in the league and then take a guy in Max Williams who's got some pretty impressive film but has some really, really poor combine numbers, especially that 40. I don't. Did he have a pro day yet? I don't know. I haven't checked if he kind of if he improved on any of that or if he sat on it or whatever. But yeah, no, I think that would be pretty strange. Maybe if he fell to 31, I could see that, but I feel like they're going to go in a different direction at 13.
With the kind of mass exodus that, from the trade point of view that they've had, at 13, Justice kind of hinted at it. There's going to be a conglomerate of tackles and wide receivers right there. That's kind of going to be the sweet spot, and probably going to be where your top corners go. Is that a good trade down or trade up spot, however you want to look at it, where they can maybe get even more picks, as we talked about with the Panthers, and kind of stock picks in a draft that's really deep but maybe not like super talented at the top, Matt?
I could see them kind of trading down. I was thinking actually, and I know Justice had mentioned about offensive linemen at 13, but if like La'el Collins fell there, or if maybe they traded up for him, I think that would be a pretty perfect fit if they are indeed trying to kind of turn it into a power running team. like behind Mark Ingram, if they maybe, like I said, if Collins falls to them, or if they trade up for him, if they got him and then bumped him inside to guard, I think that would be a pretty sweet fit. Since they bounced Ben Grubbs, and Jari Evans is declining and he's overpaid too, so that's one spot that I think they could move up for a player like that if they don't feel like he's going to slip. But just kind of like we said with Carolina, and as you mentioned, Seth, like if they wanted to take the approach of trying to take multiple stabs in this draft, if they really are rebuilding, that does make some sense too.
And I'll say this too: if for some reason Dupree falls, like that's a perfect spot because they need edge rushers super bad, and like I mean Dupree. He's the most interesting piece to me in the draft because I could totally see him going to like Atlanta, and I could see him being available at like 25. So if he's there, I mean New Orleans just needs edge help like completely, and it probably looks like Dupree and Ray are going to be the last two like premier quote unquote edge rushers in the minds of like big draft.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about Dupree since like October because I've always been enamored with his athleticism on the field, but like, oh goodness, who was it the other day? Somebody that I follow that's really good. It might have been Kyle Posey. I'll just give Kyle Posey credit because I like Kyle. So, It might have been Kyle Posey that was doing some work on it and showing some like stills on it, and he was talking about how he just doesn't use his hands like at all. Like he's basically playing without arms when he's playing. Like everything's a speed rush. Like he doesn't even really do speed to power well because he has no idea what to do with his hands.
He just drops his shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. Like the tackle gets into as soon as the tackle gets into his chest, it's over because he has no counter. He has no ability to his hips or do anything like he just. And I shouldn't say no ability. He just has no idea how to do that yet. And so when you look at Dupree, you're exactly right. The most intriguing prospect in the draft because I mean, in theory, like what he could be is perfect for like number 3 for the Jags, like being able to do a lot of different things from that end position. But I mean, from what he's done production wise and kind of the film, like you said earlier, Bob McGinn probably hit it. Like he's probably like a mid-round 2 pick in terms of just like what he's actually done on the field. And Dupree's probably my favorite player in the draft. So I mean, I'm not trying to slide him in any way, but that's just it's one of those weird situations where he could be there at 24 or 25 like we talked about earlier for the Cardinals or Panthers, and Matt and I would probably be screaming take him, and both teams pass and we're like, what the hell? And then he's out of the league in 2 years. So it's just one of those weird situations. When you look at the Saints' needs, they signed Spiller, as you talked about, but they still need a lot. I mean, they need a ton. Outside of quarterback, like there's not a single position where I'm like, oh, they're locked down there for years. Is it just at this point they need to figure out how to revamp this roster to keep it competitive, more so than it is to start to try to fill holes, Justice?
Kinda. I mean, they need help in the passing game on defense. Like that was something that just ate them alive last year. Whereas they weren't able to get pressure and they weren't able to cover anyone. Remember, they signed Champ Bailey to be their starting quarterback, and he didn't make it out of camp. Like it was bad from the jump. Like we realized. I mean, they almost gave Tramon Williams $7 million, even though the Browns did. Man, when Justin comes back, we're gonna have like an hour of just talking about how dumb the Browns are for giving him $7 million. But yeah, I mean, like they just get like edge rusher, get a corner, get something like if Trey Waynes for some reason drops, because I think Trey Waynes, like I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where they have to go.
Is there a way that you see them double dipping in round 1 in like defense then, Matt, where like maybe they take the best corner on the board, maybe Waynes or Peters falls there, and then come back with like a Preston Smith or a Diggy at the end of round one to kind of take a chance at getting a guy that could maybe rush the passer a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's totally possible, and there's a lot of wisdom in doing so. Like Justice said, that they just couldn't get pressure on anybody. They couldn't cover anybody. They had those two safeties who were supposed to be like, the next Earl and Cam, and that didn't work out. Bird apparently had a back injury that they didn't even know about when they signed him, and then he went on IR. I'm pretty sure Vaccaro was kind of disappointing too. So
Vaccaro got benched at one point.
Yeah, that's right.
Into the bench. It was nuts, man.
Yeah, and everybody was trying to tell you how he was already the second best safety in the league or whatever, and yeah. Then
Andrew Parsons, I put money on them winning the Super Bowl in the preseason, and that was just RFP.
Yeah. Well, you weren't alone though. I mean, they were pretty popular pick for the Super Bowl last year. No, so I think that if they do take one of those two corners, like Peters there, I feel like would be a really good fit with Rob Ryan because he's a really good press guy. And probably better than Wayne's, honestly. I think Peters would be a better fit. And then if they go kind of, I think would be a good fit there. I like what you mentioned, Dupree, and if he's the 13th, if he's there at 13, I think they would be all over that. He feels like a Rob Ryan defender to me.
Yeah, and I want to bring up Dupree again because I bring up the stats. So when you look at his jump scores adjusted for his density, the guys that come up are Jamie Collins, Khalil Mack, Sean Merriman, Brian Arakpo, J.J. Watt, Mario Williams, and Nick Perry. So, all of those guys are Pro Bowlers other than Nick Perry.
I was going to say, Nick Perry's the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and Nick Perry
was a
starting pass rusher until, this guy named Julius Peppers ended up in Green Bay and it pushed him down the roster. So, yeah, when you look at Dupree on paper, you're like, okay, he's a top 5 pick. And then you watch him on film and you're like, I'm really scared.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the Saints stockpiling now picks, 2 first, they got what they get? I can't even find it. 3rd round pick for Stills, got a 5th for Ben Grubbs. Is that stockpiling to add talent in your mind, or is there a guy that they need that they could go up and get in round 1, as you guys kind of talked about earlier, Matt?
I think they need to stockpile talent, not go after one guy. I mean, they have so many holes in this roster, and if Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis kind of want to survive this transition from Breeze to a new era, and the thing, I mean, things have been so weird. This is kind of a side thought, but things have been so weird in New Orleans. And I know there's a lot of media members kind of pushing what if Drew Brees gets traded, or something like that. I mean, I feels like anything goes in New Orleans right now. But just playing in reality that he stays on the roster and everything. If they want to survive the transition into a new era, I think they need to start adding a lot of complementary pieces to that roster. So I think that by stockpiling picks, they need to start kind of taking more of their guys and more rounding out the roster to be sort of defensive heavy and run, play power football sort of game.
Yeah, when you say things are going crazy in New Orleans, you're not joking. I mean, Tom Benson, the owner, we're only 2 months removed from him blackballing his family away from every the vicinity of the practices and everything. They can't step inside the Superdome anymore. I don't know what's going on.
That's a crazy HBO Southern wealthy families going head to head at each other sort of thing. That's crazy. If you ever really read into some of that stuff, it's nuts. So
they're countersuing him for it because they think he's gone senile because he's married a younger woman and all sorts of stuff. There is stuff going on in New Orleans right now.
Oh yeah, it's all over the whole organization. It's nuts.
The one thing I would say is if I were New Orleans and I really wanted, if there were a trade on the board for either Mariota or Vic Beasley, we're talking about these draft picks I feel like we've said this almost the past 2 years where the value is going to be in the 2nd and 3rd rounds. They now have 2 3rd-round picks because they have those 2 firsts and they have that second. I mean, if you really believe that the value is in the third round as well, and you kind of see those second and third round picks as sort of ambiguous, I wouldn't be totally opposed to using those 2 first round picks and the second to either move up for Mariota or Vic Beasley. Now, Vic Beasley might be more of a stretch because he's not a quarterback, and you're really not going to get any lenience, and you're not going to buy yourself any time for that. But I think Vic Beasley is really, really talented, and the way that they need an edge rusher so bad, I mean, Vic Beasley could come in and just immediately give them that.
Well, and the thing is, they have 5 picks. All 5 picks are before pick 80. So, like, their first 5 picks are, 13, 31, 44, 75, and 79. So, I mean, they're going to have 5 shots at getting top 100 players, theoretically. They'll be picked in the top 100, but with that, all-encompassing big board that everybody shares, who knows how many actual top 100 players they'll have. But, yeah, I mean, like you guys said, I know you're a Beasley fan, but like you said, that, to me, is going up to get a pass rusher when you're not like a pass rusher away is so dangerous to me. But I get where you're coming from with Beasley, because like I've said, like, the Cardinals should go sign Justin Houston to an offer sheet and give him 2 first-round picks, because like, who at 24 is going to be as impactful as Justin Houston? There's not anybody. But when you're the Saints, where you're in that, like you said, that weird limbo mode, it's kind of hard to make a definitive decision or choice like that on a player when you really can't tell where the team is going at this point. But yeah, they would also be an interesting. I think it was Matt Miller that mocked Mariota to them, right? He mocked Mariota to the Saints the other day, or said something about it.
That's interesting. I remember last year saying on this podcast how they had a top 3 round grade on Logan Thomas, and they were like totally like looking into him and being like, he can mimic Cam Newton in practice, and we'll just mold him from there and stuff like that. Like, I remember saying that at the time. This whole like, we kind of need to move past Breeze thing has kind of been in their minds for a while, but I mean, he's still Breeze, and I believe it was public when they went up to him and asked him for a restructure. He said how many more years and how much more guaranteed. Yeah. So it's not like they really have any of the power there. So I guess your idea would just be, just build behind Breeze while you still got him, and then try to plug and play Mariota like the Packers did Rodgers.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on the Saints? I'm not going to ask for day 3 guys from you guys, because neither of you can be bipartisan in this, and I don't know enough about what the Saints need. Well, they need everything. So basically, every day 3 guy can be.
What they did with Daniel Ellerbe was really dumb. Unless they restructure that contract, I have no idea how they got any sort of.
I think they did take about $5 million off or something. I saw that today. That
did they? All right, maybe I'm really dumb.
No, but he's still not good. I mean, he's still not a good player.
I mean, you are dumb, but that has nothing to do with the actual take. That's still a strong take. But Matt, I appreciate you coming on with us. Justis, as always. Matt, go ahead and tell us what you're doing right now and where we can find your work.
Yeah, sure. So right now, I mentioned at the top, I'm pretty beat right now. I'm in the process of charting like all 100 NFL wide receivers for the release of the Reception Perception first annual publication, which will come out in July. So follow along with the hashtag Reception Perception and the stuff on Backyard Banter. I'm writing for the Washington Post now some of these Reception Perception articles, and it's going to be pretty cool, in the summer when I release this whole thing. But right now, pretty much just every once in a while throwing a post up, but really just charting guys, just throwing them through my system and everything, and kind of trying to get feedback, and so that's really what I'm up to right now.
Justis, I know you're with Bleacher Report and Optimum Scouting. What else are you doing right now?
Right now, we're just pumping out, draft articles. I just dropped a piece on Efo about him transitioning to safety as opposed to playing him in the slot. Stuff like that. Just follow along. I have a piece on small school guys that's going to come out describing their backgrounds. I mean, every one of these guys has a different story. So keep an eye out on that. Before we go, I just wanted to drop one of the hot takes. Michael Rosenberg, who writes for Sports Illustrated today, wrote a piece about retirement, which obviously was kind of shocking
Oh God.
and sent Twitter kind of crazy. The first sentence of his piece says, "To understand Chris Borland's decision to retire, look across the country at another prominent young former NFL player, Aaron Hernandez."
Oh my God.
That's an interesting way to start a piece. Yeah.
I saw that today. I saw that piece today, and I was reading it at a stoplight, and I almost just rolled down the window and tossed the phone right out. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that one was interesting.
I did see that one too. There was one other one that I wanted to shout out real quick. Let me see if I can find it in these massive humanity I've got in my phone right now. I can't find it. Oh yeah, Justin wanted me to give you his hot take since he wasn't able to join us tonight, but he basically wants to say La'el Collins is one of the most overrated players in the draft. So shouts to Justin, the other member of the Draft Savages crew, with your fire take. La'el Collins, one of the most overrated players in the draft. So he told me. He told me I almost fell out of his chair 2 weeks ago when Joe said he was the #1 player on his board. So
wow,
I said that would have been good for the YouTube viewers, the podcast people wouldn't know what happened. But yeah, this is an interesting time right now. I mean, you got a lot of hot takes coming. People are going to tell you how wrong you are about the prospects that you like, and how wrong you are about the prospects you don't like because they like them.
Yeah.
Just remember that 2 years ago, Geno Smith was Aaron Rodgers. So I mean, everybody gets stuff wrong. But also remember, Teddy Bridgewater's in the Hall of Fame now. So I mean, he had 8 good games. So first ballot.
Everybody's tea tastes good this time of year.
Yeah, exactly. Perception changes quickly, and a player's career is defined in the first year, I guess, is how we can say this as we head out of here. Matt, as always, thank you for coming on. We'll definitely do this again post-draft, so you can rant or be happy about whatever your Panthers do. And Justice, we'll do this again soon, so I appreciate your time.
Yep, thanks.
All right, see you guys.
Thank you, guys.